Poddin My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Poddin My Noggin. I'm your host, CK Sims, and we just came off a pretty good run of having a lot of diverse guests on the show, and there's more guests coming. And I thought to myself recently that maybe I needed to do a solo podcast. And the reason for that is there's been something weighing sort of heavily on my mind. And I think I want to address that in today's podcast. So, I think everybody's aware that there's so much going on in the world right now. Wars, there's celebrities falling left, right, and center. There's people coming out in droves and taking action against, celebrities and influencers that are supporting different things. And I love to see that. I think that's, there's a lot of things going on, like the boycott Loblaws thing that's happening right now in Canada. The power lives with the people. And the more people can use their voices and take affirmative action against things that they do not agree with, the more we will actually see change in this world as a whole. And, for me, I'm seeing since the Met Gala, this new trend, which is hashtag blockout 2024. And I think that is a really interesting and affirmative way of making your voices heard, not supporting people that don't align with your values, companies, that sort of thing. I love to see this. I think that this is great. And, when you affect people's money, that's when people will start listening, right? So the reason I wanted to film this particular podcast is because I have a dream, just like everybody has a dream. And my dream is building something that I'm proud of, right? And, if you've been following along with this podcast, the first one aired at the beginning of January, and this was me stepping out from behind fear and starting to pour into myself what I pour into like companies so easily and readily, and just not letting fear rule my life anymore. And so I've been, this is episode 19 of Poddin My Noggin, and I'm really proud of how it's starting to take shape and, what I'm doing and with it, and the conversations that I'm having on it, and the conversations that are stemming from this, because I've appeared on other podcasts since. So for me, I want to ensure people who support me know who I am and what my values are. And I don't think there's ever been a time more important than right now for people to be upfront about what their values are and what they stand for, so people can make informed decisions on who they support, who they give their power to, who they invest in, whatever the situation may be. So for me, one of the things that is such a massive, and I'm searching for the words, it's such a massive sort of importance in my life, is for people to understand, and it's not even really for people to understand, it's for me to understand and to communicate this the best way that I know how, is that my integrity is not for sale. And what I mean by that is, I, like everybody else, want to make it, right? I want to have a really successful podcast. I want to become wealthy and be able to have options. It's not about the money, it's about the options for me. So like choosing where I want to live or how I want to live, those particular things are what's important to me. So there's not necessarily a dollar value attached to that. It's just a little bit more freedom in, you know, carving out something for my own path, but doing that with integrity. I had a conversation with my best friend once, and, you know, obviously as a podcaster and you're starting a show and you're taking this on, you want to find some success, right? So ideally, I could find a sponsor for this podcast that could be aligned with my values and say, you know, they're going to offer me X number of dollars per show or X number of dollars per year for this many shows, that sort of thing. And I was having a conversation with my best friend, and I was struggling here because I'm one of those overthinkers. I've mentioned this before. So, like, what if someone came on, you know, got in touch with me and they wanted to support me, and they were saying, you know what, we're going to offer you $5 million a year to sponsor you, you know, that sort of thing, but you cannot speak out against domestic violence. And there's two sides to that coin, and it's a tough situation to be in. So my initial gut reaction is that's a hard no, because we need to speak out about domestic violence and we need to make sure that that conversation doesn't go away. But then the other side of that coin is, okay, well, they're offering you $5 million a year. Their only stipulation is that you don't speak out against domestic violence. There are hundreds of other really important causes that I can speak out about. And the contract's for, say, 5 years. And so in 5 years with $5 million, I could grow this show to be massive, perhaps. And then on the 6th year, I could come out and start speaking positively to against domestic violence. And so, like, these are things that I think are really important for people to understand when it comes to, you know, making deals or that sort of thing. I think the end result is, and my decision would be a hard no. And the reason being is, when I started this podcast, my goal of it was to be honest, transparent, communicative, educational, talk about mental health, share stories that surrounded all kinds of plights in life, and to help, you know, illuminate or highlight some of people's struggles in the world and how they've worked to either overcome them and find their own definition of success, or how they're still in them and working to manage surviving in that situation. So for me to be offered such a large amount of money, but then to have a stipulation that says you can't talk about domestic violence, that would be very on my integrity. Because then there's conversations I've already had on Poddin My Noggin about domestic violence. So for me, my integrity is not for sale. And I feel 99.99% confident that my answer to this hypothetical situation, of course, would be a hard no. And we can never be 100% sure. $5 million is a lot of money, right? Especially if it's $5 million a year for 5 years. It's $25 million. How good could my life be with that $25 million? And how much could I grow my show in 5 years with that money, that in 6 years I could talk about domestic violence? So, like, not everything is a simple situation, right? And every single person's different. And I think people need to understand that when people make choices in life, sometimes they make them perhaps ill-informed. Sometimes they make them because they're in a desperate situation and they have to try and make ends meet to survive. It's very nuanced and there's always layers. But for me, I really do believe without a question that it would be a hard no if that stipulation was attached to a sponsorship. One of the things I want to start off with as well is just to reiterate that for me as a human being, kindness is the only legacy worth leaving behind. And I need you to understand that kindness and being nice are two separate things. There's a huge distinction. I am not a nice person. I'm a kind person. I'm not going to be nice or polite just for the sake of saving face. But what I will always be in every interaction is kind. And what I mean by that is that you can be kind and disagree with someone. You can be kind and stand up against something. You can be kind and assertive and set boundaries. Being nice is just being like a yes person or a people pleaser or agreeable. Don't be nice, be kind. So that's who I am as a human being. So in an effort to ensure you know who you are watching and supporting, today I will share some of my views. And this is kind of an uncomfortable situation for me to be in because nobody wants to go on the internet. Well, maybe there are people who do, but nobody wants to go on the internet and speak in dissent. I think, when you're putting yourself out there, I think a lot of people want, the world to like you, but I don't need to be liked. And I don't want supporters to watch this show under a pretense that's just not true, right? I want you to know who it is and that you're tuning into, who it is that you are investing in, or when I say investing, I don't necessarily mean monetarily. I mean like with your time, with your likes, with your shares, whatever the situation be, it's all an investment that you're making into people, right? And anybody who supports me, I am so deeply grateful for that support. And I also understand the layers and nuance that it can take for a person to say, I like this person, I'm going to follow them. Or I like this person, I'm going to subscribe to their YouTube channel. Or I like this person or this person's content, I'm going to hit a heart. That's all investment, right? And that's where your power lives, especially on the internet. It's by liking, sharing, hearting things, subscribing, following. All of those things are you investing yourself into somebody else. And I don't follow a lot of people because I'm very selective about who I want showing up on my feed, for instance. So I typically follow people who are in the world trying to uplift others and help the world heal and grow. So I've made notes because I'm scatterbrained, and I wanted to make sure that I properly addressed the things that I am addressing today. And so this is the one I'm going to start with is probably the one that gives me the most angst. And it's such an polarized area right now, but it is the Israel-Hamas conflict. And by conflict, I do mean genocide. And I want to be very clear about how I feel about this whole situation. I am not anti-Jew, and I am not pro-Palestine. I am pro-people and anti-death, especially of innocent men, children, and women. And no particular order of importance there, just how it came out. The current Israeli power is, in my opinion, committing war crimes and needs to be held accountable in international courts. I'm sorry, but this is the situation. Too many innocent people have died. And the thing that befuddles my brain is how, with all of their military power that's, they get from donations, if you will, support from neighboring countries in the United States of America, that they couldn't surgically remove Hamas in a way that did not inflict so much death and destruction on the Palestinian people. And to me, what they've done is the equivalent of dropping the Empire State Building on an anthill. It's absolute overkill. And they are, as far as I'm concerned, responsible for genocide. It has to stop. The powers that be need to go in, and instead of withholding rights, they need to go to Palestine and fight back. That's my thought on this process. Because the US made a statement about withholding military aid, and the Israeli power came out and said that they don't care. They're going to do what they have to do, period. Done. There should be two states. Jerusalem should be handed over to an organization and belong to no country, no state, and be classified as a world religious space. So anyone who has ties to Jerusalem in their faith can go there and freely worship without fear of death or destruction. That said, I need to be clear. As people from the West, we cannot turn on the Jewish people or the Palestinian people. What we see is what the media shows us. We don't see nor understand every single nuance here. It's impossible for us to understand. So while I agree we need to be loud about the atrocities the Israeli power are committing, we must show compassion for the normal, everyday Jewish and Palestinian citizens that are like us. Because if you think that you're just getting up, every day and living your life, maybe going to work and all of these things, and this doesn't sort of affect us in a sense of like our day-to-day lives, but we're going to talk about it on the internet. There are Jewish people in Israel right now who are no more responsible for the government's act of genocide than we are for Biden refusing to aid them. I hope that makes sense. So there are real people who have hopes and dreams on both sides who are powerless. And yes, unfortunately, right now, Palestine is in a far worse situation than Israel. However, there are people on both sides, and we must show love and compassion to all of them, right? So that's how I feel about that. What I think, honestly, we need to do is stop making statements on the internet and literally pester the shit out of our elected officials through emails, letters, going to their office, protesting outside of their office, just forcing them to intervene and put a stop to all of this. And as far as I'm concerned, I am just tired of the greatest atrocities in human history being committed in the name of religion. And I am so over it. And we just need to move on. So the Israel power needs to be held accountable for their actions, but we must show kindness and compassion to the Israeli people and the Palestinian people, regardless of where we live. It's their people. We have to show them that compassion and that love. Moving on to North American Christianity. And I'm talking about North American Christianity today specifically. The same sort of thing exists everywhere in the world. But I'm just talking about North America because that's where I live in Canada. So for me, in Christianity, there are two types of Christians, okay? And there has been for a really long time. So you have the first type, which is the loud, ludicrous, hateful Christians who are out there harming others, taking away rights and freedoms, and weaponizing Christ to inflict pain. They call themselves Christians to mask their evil intent. It is what it is. They do not strive to be like Jesus. If they think they are Christians, they will be in for a surprise when they stand at the pearly gates. That's for true. That's for sure. The second type are the true Christians, who are warm, tolerant, welcoming, compassionate. Those who understand that mirroring God's love is unconditional love is what brings people into faith. Okay? Those people need to act louder, not speak, because lip service right now will not reinstate God's ministry. But getting out into the community and loving your neighbor will. And so my plea to anybody who's a real Christian is don't speak up, act up. Start showing your communities, start showing everybody your love and what God's love looks like. It's tolerance, it's acceptance, and maybe not acceptance of the sin, okay? And I'm air quoting here, the sin, but acceptance of the human and loving them despite of the sin. Hi, Jesus and the woman at the well. Like, come on, where's that been lost on these fake Christians? And so, yes, I do believe that the loud ones and the government who are spitting vitriol and all of that stuff, they're fake Christians. That's my belief. Come for me, I don't care. The true Christians, they exist. I know so many of them. Don't speak up, act up. Lip service, like I said, is not going to bring people into God's ministry. Your actions will. And people need to be reminded what true Christianity is all about. Okay? And so with that, I ask you today, what Christ do you follow? Abortion is my next topic. And so I think this is a really polarized topic as well. And for me, I am pro-choice, okay? People who are taking away the rights of women don't care about the children. They don't. If they did, there would be funding and supports and programs for these children who they don't want to be aborted, to support them. A lot of these children will end up in the system, in foster care, in adoption. They will spend a lifetime with years of trauma and displacement and abandonment, and it will haunt them. And there's a guest that I will have on the show in the coming weeks that we will talk about just that. Everybody's, focused on the fact, oh, yay, they got adopted. But there's so much nuanced and layered underneath all of it that we don't think about collectively that these individuals have to go through for their entire lives. And, that's a topic that I want to bring to light on this show and show the other side of the coin. Okay? So here's the thing. I wish we lived in a world where abortion wasn't needed. Okay? And I want to explain that real quick because the idea, obviously, when I believe that there's a specific amount of time where they're not developed enough and all of that stuff, like essentially what the laws usually states. Late term abortions, when it comes to the health of the woman, are necessary. I don't like the idea of babies being aborted. I don't. But do you know what trumps that? Do you know what trumps that sort of feeling of like, oh, I don't really like it? Well, number one, I'm a man. I don't get to say that. I mean, I can say it, but like, I don't have a right to say it. I'm sorry. Anybody out there, any man out there who thinks that they have a right to say it, you're mistaken. Because you don't have to carry that child, okay? Your body doesn't have to go through a myriad of uncomfortable changes, painful changes. Your belly button doesn't have to pop, right? You don't have to experience like if you just Googled the level of complications, changes to a woman's body, discomfort. And this is all just leading up to delivery. Don't even get me started on what could happen during delivery or just before or just after, and how a woman could be completely ripped apart. You don't get to talk about it. I'm sorry. I'm a man. That's my number one reason why I don't want, little babies to be aborted if they don't have to be. That's my number one reason why it doesn't matter that I feel that way. And number two, and I kept saying number one, but number two is the most important, just so we're clear. The number two reason why my feeling of that situation doesn't matter is because nothing and nobody besides a woman should have complete agency over their bodies and what happens to it. So I'm pro-choice with that little feeling of, I wish we didn't have to abort little babies when it's not needed. It's trumped by the fact that I'm a man and by the fact that women should have complete agencies over their bodies at all times. End of story. We're moving on. That's all I have to say on abortion. Feminism. I'm a feminist. For me, being a feminist does not mean I hate men. Okay? I hate men who harm women through domestic violence, sexual assault, and rape. I hate them. They are scum. They are bottom feeders. I'm a feminist in that women winning and taking up space gives me life. Like, for instance, Taylor Swift right now, Beyonce, the whole situation. These are just examples of celebrities who are in the media daily. There's so many women out there, women leaders that I've had who have changed my life because of just how incredible they are. So when I see women winning, I get really excited about that. So there are men out there who feel emasculated by this. And that's not their fault, actually, but I'll talk about that in a second. And not actually, but entirely. It's not their fault entirely. Okay? We'll say that. Women need complete equality, equity, no more disparity. And men need to allow that to happen. And I know that, there are men out there who feel like their space is shrinking. Your space is not shrinking. Women are taking up more space. There's enough room for all of y'all at the top and in every level. So step aside and support and stand up. If you're a man who supports women, you need to stand up and speak out against other men who are trying to diminish them. I'm sorry, but this needs to happen, right? Women, as of the last couple of years, are on fire. And I am here for it. Literally here for it. And it needs to continue happening. We need to support them in this. And end of story. Before we talk about what I was just mentioning about it's not men's fault entirely, we're going to take a commercial break.
Life in Stitches by CK Sims. Available for purchase in paperback and ebook on all major platforms. Partner today with CK Sims and Poddin My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
Okay, welcome back to Poddin My Noggin. If you're just tuning in, we're just recapping really quickly on today's episode and what it is. Today's episode is very much about my values as a podcaster, what I want to achieve in life with this show, and the fact that my integrity isn't for sale. And we spoke about before the break, the Blockout 2024, a lot of celebrities falling left, right, and center. And my idea that I want people to know who I am. So if you choose to support me, you're not supporting me off a pretense that's not true. And you understand who I am as a human being and what I stand for and those values. Before the break, I made a comment. Excuse me. I made a comment how I'm a feminist. And there are men who feel emasculated by women taking up space and winning. And I had said that's not entirely their fault. So we're going to talk about that right now, because maybe before the break, everybody was like, no, FCK, I'm going to, end this podcast right now. But I want to talk about this because one thing that I'm very much an advocate for mental health, and that we need to talk about it more. And I'm very much an advocate for men's mental health. And I want to talk about that. So there are men out there, most men I would have to say, who think they're strong, maybe even warrior. They think this because they're tough, they're macho, men don't cry, all of these things. That, my friends, is a societal subscription that we've been force feeding you since the beginning of time. It's a lie. It's a faulty lie. Maybe you had to be this way back prior to technology, when you actually had real predators that you had to be afraid of. Like, I don't know, during caveman time and then in early society, like that sort of thing. Maybe that's when you had to be these types of men, but that does not exist anymore. And it is a societal subscription that we have force fed you since you were children. So what I mean by this, and before I begin, is I believe, and I think there are many who do, real strength comes when a man can learn to be vulnerable, admit they are not okay. Okay? So what I said about it's not their fault entirely before the break, what I meant was when males are children, they are taught the messaging of big boys don't cry. You have to grin and bear it. Emotions are weakness. Push it down, don't feel. And this is the narrative. This is the narrative that women teach their sons, and it's not a conscious thing. It's just a part of that societal subscription that's been happening forever and ever. And so never in their existence has someone taught them healthy ways of processing complex emotion. Okay? So like fear, failure, rejection, and later sexual frustration. They have had few, if any, in our time, males to model this after. Okay? So a male who might be watching and completely enraged with me right now and wants to, punch me in the face, whatever, I get it. Here's the thing. That's not your fault. It was not your fault. It has never been your fault that you were never taught how to process complex emotions. It has been a narrative that you need to be just the emotional range of a rock to show love to your partners, right? And to your children. But any other sort of emotion is completely just not okay. And this starts right from when you're a young child. You fall and you hit your knee, you are immediately told, come on, suck it up, you're a big boy. What kind of messaging is that? And to be told this over and over and over throughout your entire life, it is a form of conditioning. And that conditioning has led us to men who do not know how to process emotions in a healthy manner. Straight up, end of story. Okay. And then this continues from childhood, throughout adolescence, through early adulthood. And what this results in is suppressed emotions, low emotional intelligence, and it comes out in violence. Okay. Because the model is if you're angry, punch it. Right? Comes out in domestic violence. They don't know how to communicate properly. They don't know how to unpack and move through their complex emotions to understand these fits of rage that come up from within, and they don't know how to channel it. And you do see a lot of men who claim that they're sorry for hitting their wives, but then they do it again. And I believe that they are sorry to a degree. Okay. But they still don't learn or understand how to process that emotion. You see this also with people who are domestic violence, sexual assault, rape, all of those things are because of and murder are all results of not being able to process complex emotions. So, yes, there are sick people out there who do things that maybe cannot be helped, but we would see a massive reduction in domestic violence cases, sexual assault cases, rape cases, and perhaps murder against women. Okay. If we introduce programs that are free of charge into our schools, online, completely free of charge, as I said, and readily available to men to start to learn how to process their emotion. And my thing for you right now is that don't internalize the belief that you shouldn't feel because you should. And know that a lot of what happens in our world right now of men hurting women is a result of societal subscriptions and the lack of ability to process complex emotions. Okay. We need to break that subscription. And I will leave you on this one thing. While this wasn't your fault growing up, right? This was never your fault. It was what was force fed to you, what your entire identity is probably built on, all faulty mechanisms and lies, really. Where your trauma is not your fault, your recovery is your responsibility. And I had a podcast a few weeks ago with Carolyn Murphy who stated that, and that was a very powerful statement, and it could not be more true. So if you're a man, know that how you've moved in life so far is not necessarily your fault. But to create change within yourself, that is your responsibility. And there are supports out there. There are therapy, so many things. I don't know if we have necessarily a proper program that's readily available and free for males of all ages to learn how to process complex emotions. But if we don't, and someone sees this show, let's build it. Let's start a campaign and make this happen. There's hope for all of y'all, and there's room for both women and men in all layers of it. Moving on to my next area. I don't like to talk about politics. Politics are so polarized. And when I started this podcast, I was going to never talk about politics, and I was never going to talk about religion. And the religion component came up through some of my guests because, Carolyn Murphy her book is called God, Why Did You Save Me? And, you know, I love God. I do. Love Jesus. And I shared this story on Alyssa Decker's podcast, Equilibrium Echoes, recently as to why I love God and how I had to reconcile that in my life to be able to be gay and love Jesus at the same time. So, but that's mine. It's not for you to judge and not for anybody else. Your individual walk with God is your individual walk with God. And then obviously politics was the other one I didn't want to speak about. But I think in this effort to ensure that if you choose to support me and to dial in and, come on this journey with me as I build this show and have great conversations about adversity and healing and people getting through their hardest moments in life and ending up in their definition of success, then I want you to know who I am. So I'm going to talk about politics for a moment. And I want to say this. In 2016, America elected a cancer into democracy. Since then, that cancer has spread throughout every arm of the United States. In 2020, the American people voted to surgically remove this cancer. While the treatment may not have lived up to public expectations, it isn't a cancer. Now, in November, that cancer has a possibility of returning in full force. And if that cancer returns, I am confident it will destroy what's good left in America. Why am I a Canadian talking about American politics? Well, I'll tell you. I am in the US. I haven't spoken to or met an American I didn't like or that I couldn't see myself in. Okay? There are so many similarities between the US and Canada. Yes, we have different governing bodies, we have different histories and things like that, but we share so much that is so similar. I love Americans like I love Canadians. And I want us all to thrive and do our best and be the best countries that we can be. So the reason I'm talking about this today is because as a Canadian, I am beginning to see the spread of cancer here in Canada as a result of your decision in 2016. So you may not like the treatment of this cancer. And yes, I am speaking in innuendos at this moment, and that's fine because I don't want to land on anybody's radar in that off chance, but I want to be truthful. So you may not like the treatment for this cancer, but you have to, at this point, consider the lesser of two apparent evils. Think about that. But whatever you decide, and no matter what side of the border you are on, get out and vote this year like your rights and freedoms depend on it, because they do. And that's my comment on politics. I'm going to end it there. Okay. Moving on to the next one that's really important to me. Trans people. I stand with them. I stand with trans folks. Enough is enough. Let them be. To be honest, let them be. What does it matter to you when you lay your head on your pillow at the end of the day if someone is trans or not? Ask yourself that question. And in speaking of trans people, I want to talk about pronouns. I find this whole situation with pronouns to be laughable and sad. And I think for me, those who are opposed to using people's preferred pronouns, I want to approach this in a specific way. So, someone's opposed to using someone else's pronouns. Listen, Candace, this is what I want to say to you. Your name is Candace Brown, and that has been your name since birth. Now you're like, 38, 39, 40 years old. You go out and you meet this partner, and you start dating. And you go through this process, and then through this process, you discover that this partner is your soulmate. and then this partner asks you to marry them, and you say yes, and you go off and you get married. Now, unless you live in France or Quebec, you're probably going to change your last name or assume their last name. So you come back to work and you're all happy. You've had this joyous event in your life and you're showing pictures and you're talking about it and all of these things. And then you submit the documents to, your HR department and things start to get changed. And all of a sudden now you're Candace White. Okay. So your expectation is that people will start referring to you as Candace White. Now, there's obviously an adjustment period because people who have known you your whole life, you've been Candace Brown. And, every time that they say, hey, Miss Brown, Candace Brown, you're going to correct them. And you're going to say, actually, it's Candace White now because I'm married. They didn't sign up for this. They weren't a part of your first date. They weren't a part of your relationship growing into love. They weren't a part of your engagement. They weren't a part of your big day. Okay? You did all of this because you felt like you wanted to make this change. This is now who you are. You are now a married woman and you're partnered and you've decided to change your last name to match your partner. So while you're going to go into this with the expectation that people are going to start referring to you as Candace White, perhaps there's some people who are like, nope, no, you're not Candace White. You're Candace Brown. Sorry. I'm so happy for you that you went out and you had this marriage and all that stuff, but I don't really care. Like, you're Candace Brown. And these individuals are going to call you Candace Brown or Miss Brown for the rest of your life. You are going to get upset and feel disrespected by this. And you're going to feel as if they're discounting your choice in life or discrediting your choice in life. It's the same thing. It takes very little effort to learn a person's pronouns and to make that change. And mistakes are allowed to happen. Anybody out there who shares their pronouns and then you make mistakes and doesn't give you grace to correct them, that's a them problem, not a you problem. The problem with you is that somewhere along the lines, and I want you to ask yourself, where did you decide that your lived experiences were more important than someone else's? Where did that happen? So in my mind and my belief is that people who say it's about grammar, it has never been about grammar, ever. That's an excuse. If you believe it is about grammar, then you have some deep, deep work to do because it is not about grammar. It's about having human decency, not denying someone's existence, and just showing compassion and love. So that's how I feel about that. For people who don't use pronouns appropriately, that's how I feel about that. You're going to make mistakes. We're even programmed to assume gender, okay? Which a lot of people are trying not to and trying to learn to not assume gender. That might be a stretch for you. But if someone shares their pronouns with you, make a mental note and give effort. You want them to use your married name versus your maiden name? It's the same thing. The exact same thing. So my show, Myself as a Person, is about accepting all people. Anyone who is living a life who is not harming others. And I mean real mental and physical harm. Not this perceived harm of offending your delicate sense. They should be treated with kindness, compassion, and real authentic love. So there you have it. Those are my values. And that's who I am as a podcaster, as an author, as anybody who, in any job that I work. These are the things that I believe and operate my life on. So if you choose to support me or not support me, that's the thing. I'd rather it take me 10 to 20 years to amass a following of supporters where I can earn a living off of my podcast and my public efforts, if you will, than to have those followers supporting me, having a massive followers supporting me right now under a pretense that's not true. I want you to know who I am, who you're investing your time and money in. Straight up. Like, I just don't follow me unless these values are your values or they're similar. Because what's going to happen is if you do follow me, I'm going to constantly disappoint you over and over again. It took me a long time to get to who I am today. I don't see myself changing. There was a period in my life where I might have not had the integrity to say to anyone that, no, I'll take that $5 million. Sure, I won't talk about domestic violence. Who cares? Like, that was me in my 20s. I've talked about this on this podcast before, but me as a 43-year-old gay man, that is not who I am today. And I'm very proud of who I am today. So, yeah. And for anybody out there who even thinks for a moment that they're like, well, maybe I can follow him, like, some of it, I'm woke. So if that term offends you, I'm woke and proud of it. And I will continue to awaken, and I will continue to stand for marginalized communities and Indigenous people and BIPOC and anybody who needs a voice in addition to their own to ensure that they receive equality and safe spaces and supports. That's who I am. That's where we're coming from on this show. So, my name is CK Sims. I want to thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Poddin My Noggin. And until next time, I want you to go out there and live your wildest dreams. Take care, everyone.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@ccsims.com or visit ccsims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.